My uncle promised me everything, but left it to my cousin instead. It was raining the day we buried Uncle Ray. The kind of cold, persistent drizzle that seeps into your bones and makes even the bravest people hunch their shoulders. I parked my borrowed car 2 blocks away and walked the rest of the way to the funeral home, hands shoved deep into the pockets of my worn jacket. Everything about the town felt smaller. The corner bakery, where Uncle Ray used to buy me lemon bars, was now a vape shop. The antique bookstore, with the creaky wooden steps, had closed. But the air still smelled the same, like wet leaves and chimney smoke. Inside the funeral home, people spoke in hushed tones, offering polite nods and handshakes. I saw faces I hadn't seen in years, old neighbors, former employees, distant relatives I barely remembered. But their words were always the same. "He talked about you all the time, Andy. You were like a son to him." I just nodded, smiled when appropriate, and accepted the lukewarm coffee from someone I didn't recognize. I wasn't sure if I felt comforted or more betrayed by how much they all assumed I already knew. Like I was part of some plan, like I was prepared. I wasn't. Uncle Ray's photo sat on an easel by the casket. He looked stern in the picture, but I remembered the laugh lines around his eyes better. The way he grunted every time he bent over to examine a broken leg on a chair, muttering, "They just don't make 'em like they used to." He taught me to love the work. Not just the finished piece, but the process. The sanding, the staining, the little fixes that made something old feel alive again. "You see this dovetail joint?" he once said, holding up a drawer. "This wasn't made by a machine. Some guy cut that by hand 50 years ago. That matters. That's worth preserving." When I was 16, I started helping him at the shop after school. By 22, I was running it with him. He used to say, "One day, all this'll be yours. You've got the hands for it, the eye," and I believed him. No, worse, I built my life around it. I didn't chase better paying jobs, didn't leave town, didn't ask for more, because I believed in the unspoken agreement between us. I loved that man like a second father, maybe even more than my real one. "Andy," someone said behind me. I turned. It was Aunt Carol, tall, thin, wrapped in a beige wool coat, pearls tied around her neck like they were holding her spine straight. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said coolly. "After everything." After everything? What did she mean by that? "I wouldn't miss it," I said quietly. He meant a lot to me. She smiled with her lips, not her eyes. "Well, you always did enjoy fixing broken things." Before I could respond, she turned and walked off, her heels clicking on the polished floor. I took a seat in the back, away from the family section. I didn't want to be near Graham, my cousin, her only son, who had flown in from whatever overpriced life he was currently living. The last time I saw him, he was bragging about a crypto project that had gone under 3 months later. Graham had never spent a day in the workshop. He hated the smell of sawdust and called the shop quaint with a sneer. Uncle Ray used to roll his eyes when Graham visited and whispered, "That boy couldn't tell oak from MDF if his stock portfolio depended on it." The service was short. A few words from the pastor, a hymn no one really sang. No eulogies, just a closed casket and a lot of awkward silence. Afterward, I found myself walking the same old route back toward the shop. I paused in front of the windows. The sign still said, R. Whitmore Antiques and Restoration. The bell above the door didn't jingle anymore, it was broken. I'd been meaning to fix it. Through the fogged glass I could see the long workbench, the lathe, the wall of hand tools. My hands itched with memory. Every inch of that place was muscle memory to me. I could strip a table down, sand it smooth, stain it dark, and bring it back to life with my eyes closed. That shop had been my life, my future, and now it was just quiet. I stood there a long time, listening to the rain on the awning, remembering the way Uncle Ray would hum while working, completely off-key. How he once yelled at me for using varnish before the stain had dried, then took me out for burgers anyway. He wasn't perfect. He was stubborn, gruff, had a temper when things didn't go right. But he was loyal, honest, and he always made me feel like I mattered. That's why I never doubted him. That's why I wasn't ready for what came next. The room smelled like lemon polish and old money. I sat on the far end of the velvet couch in Uncle Ray's living room, the same room where we used to drink lukewarm tea after work, our boots kicked off, talking about nothing and everything. But now, the chairs were filled with distant relatives, neighbors, and people I barely recognized, all dressed in black and whispering like someone might still hear them from beyond the grave. At the front of the room stood a tall, thin man with a worn leather briefcase and a voice like dry paper. Mr. Blake, Uncle Ray's lawyer, formal to a fault and allergic to small talk. He cleared his throat. "Thank you all for coming. As executor of Raymond Whitmore's estate, I will now read the final will and testament, as requested by the deceased." I swallowed hard. My palms were damp. Across from me, Aunt Carol perched like a hawk in a silk blouse and her trademark pearls, a tight smile carved across her face. Next to her lounged Graham, her golden boy, in a navy blazer, hair perfectly tousled like a man who paid someone to make it look effortless. He looked tan, well-fed, and vaguely bored. He winked at me when our eyes met. I looked away. Mr. Blake unfolded the document slowly, as if savoring the suspense. "I, Raymond Whitmore, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this my final will and testament." I barely breathed. As for my assets, the antique restoration business, the house located at 213 Maple Street, and the associated financial accounts, I leave in full to my nephew. There was a pause, a millisecond too long. Graham Whitmore. The words didn't land at first. I blinked, waiting for a correction, for a laugh, for someone to jump up and say, "Just kidding." But no one moved. No one said anything. Then I felt it, like a punch in the gut. Graham, not me. I felt heat rise in my neck, my pulse pounding in my ears. I looked at Mr. Blake, then back at Aunt Carol, who now wore a look of smug satisfaction so dense I could feel it across the room. She tilted her head at me, lips curling, like she had been waiting for this moment. Graham leaned forward, putting a hand over his chest with fake humility. "Wow. That's unexpected." He didn't even try to hide the grin. My fists clenched in my lap. I couldn't speak. My tongue felt thick, heavy. This wasn't a mistake. This was a betrayal. A deliberate knife. I heard murmurs behind me. Didn't Ray always say Andy would inherit the shop? I thought he trained him from the ground up. Mr. Blake continued, unbothered. "In addition, I leave the 1958 Buick Roadmaster to Graham, and all personal belongings within the home, including but not limited to furniture, tools, and antiques." I caught that word, tools. Those tools had my fingerprints in their handles. I'd oiled them, organized them, used them every day for years. And now they belonged to a man who couldn't tell a chisel from a cheese knife. When Mr. Blake finished, there was a polite round of nodding and a few people left, muttering condolences under their breath. Some glanced at me, confused. A few avoided my gaze entirely. I stood slowly. My legs felt strange, disconnected. Graham made his way over with the air of someone doing me a great favor. "Hey man, tough break. I know this probably stings, but if you ever need to borrow the space for a project or something." I stared at him. "You want me to borrow the place I built with him?" I said, voice low and sharp. Graham raised his hands defensively. "Hey, just trying to be generous. We're family, right? You never stepped foot in that workshop unless it was to show off." I snapped. "You didn't even like the smell of it." "Still don't," he said, smirking, "but real estate's real estate." Before I could reply, Aunt Carol stepped between us like a referee. "Now Andy, I hope you'll respect your uncle's wishes, and not cause any unpleasantness. Grief makes people irrational." Grief? No, this wasn't grief. This was fury wrapped in confusion, tied with a ribbon of disbelief. "Unpleasantness," I repeated, almost laughing. "You think this is about being unpleasant?" She smiled coldly. "I think you've always had trouble accepting your place, dear. It's time to grow up. Grow up." I turned and walked out before I said something I'd regret, or worse, something I wouldn't. Outside, the rain had picked up again. I stood on the porch, letting it hit my face, not caring who saw. Inside that house, my name had disappeared. My future had vanished. The man who promised me everything had, in the end, left me with nothing. And I had no idea why. I didn't plan to go back to the workshop. Not so soon, not like this. But something pulled me there. Maybe the need for closure, maybe just plain masochism. The street was quieter than usual. the sky overcast, casting a dull gray wash over everything. I paused outside the old brick building, the familiar sign still above the door, R. Whitmore Antiques and Restoration. The gold lettering had started to peel. I reached for the handle. It was unlocked. Inside, the air smelled like dust and fresh drywall. I froze. The space looked gutted. Where once stood elegant Victorian armoires and polished Queen Anne tables, now there were torn-out walls, exposed beams, and a neon beer sign leaning against the counter, still in its packaging. "Guess I should have locked that," a voice called from the back. Graham. He walked out in ripped jeans and a Henley, his sleeves rolled up, holding a sledgehammer like it was some kind of trophy. His hair was tousled, artfully disheveled. He looked like a man playing dress-up in someone else's work boots. "You're renovating," I said, barely keeping my voice level. "Repurposing," he corrected. "This place is gonna be sick. Craft beer bar, retro vibes, maybe some live music. We'll keep the antique sign, for character." I stared at him, unable to find words that wouldn't burn. He gestured to the back. "We already knocked out the tool wall. That room's becoming a lounge area. Thinking exposed brick, Edison bulbs, that whole gritty aesthetic." I stepped further in. The long workbench, the one Uncle Ray built with his own hands, was gone. The wall of tools, chisels, clamps, handsaws, labeled and arranged like a museum, had been stripped clean. The oak display case with the curved glass was shattered, pieces swept into a dusty pile in the corner. I swallowed hard. "You destroyed it." "It was just old furniture, Andy," Graham said, shrugging. "No one wants to buy antique sideboards anymore. People want fast, fun, modern. This shop was stuck in the past. I'm giving it new life." "No," I said. "You're erasing his—" He tilted his head. "Look, I know this is personal for you, but this is business. And honestly, you're better off moving on. No hard feelings. No hard feelings." My fingers curled into fists, nails digging into my palms. It felt like someone had taken a sledgehammer to my ribs. In the doorway behind me, I heard the soft creak of hinges. I turned. Jenna. She stood in her work boots, wearing a raincoat over her usual all-black outfit, glasses fogged slightly from the air outside. Her eyes swept the room, and I saw it hit her too. The emptiness, the violation of something once sacred. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Hey Jenna," Graham said smoothly, like this was all completely normal. "Still designing those weird chairs?" She ignored him, walking straight to me. "Andy, are you okay?" I shook my head slowly. I thought I'd be angry, but I just feel hollow. One of the old employees, Marcus, a quiet guy who used to carve intricate details into drawer fronts, walked past carrying a box of tools. His eyes met mine, and he gave a faint, apologetic smile before heading out the back. "They're all gone," I muttered. "Everyone. Fired or quit." Jenna's voice was low. "They were loyal to you, not him." "Doesn't matter," I said. "It's not mine. Nothing is—" She placed a hand on my arm. "That's not true. This place lived because of you. Your hands, your eye. He may have owned it, but you were its soul." I didn't say anything, because if I did, I might break. "You should have seen him," Graham piped up, gesturing around like a real estate agent. "Andy used to baby every busted chair that came in here, like they were priceless relics. Half of them weren't even worth the time." I turned to face him. "You don't get it, do you? It wasn't about the money, it was about the craft, about saving something someone else gave up on." He smirked. "Yeah, well, that attitude is why you're broke." It hit deeper than it should have, mostly because it was true. I didn't have savings. I didn't own a house. I barely had enough to cover rent for another month. I'd built my life around a future that no longer existed. Graham stepped back and spread his arms like he was offering some kind of gift. "Look, man, I can toss you a little money. Or hey, bartending job if you want to stay connected to the place." I laughed once, sharp and humorless. "You think I'd serve beer in a graveyard?" His smile faltered. I turned to Jenna. "Let's go." She hesitated only a second before following. We walked out in silence. The door creaked shut behind us, the bell above it long gone. Outside, the air was cold and wet. Jenna handed me an umbrella. I didn't open it. "I don't know what to do now," I said quietly. I spent 12 years building something I never really owned. Jenna was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Then maybe it's time to build something no one can take away." I didn't respond, because right now, all I could feel was the ache in my chest, the echo of empty walls, and the quiet certainty that I had never felt so small. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't sure I'd ever feel whole again. I told myself I was only going back for closure. One last visit. One final walk through the house that used to feel like a second home. Uncle Ray's place hadn't changed much. Not yet, anyway. The new owners hadn't moved in, but boxes lined the hallway like cardboard ghosts, and the furniture was wrapped in plastic, stripped of warmth. I walked through slowly, brushing my fingers along the walls. The air smelled like dust and lemon oil, faint and distant, like the ghost of a memory. The house felt smaller now. Not physically, just emptied. It was hard to believe so much life had once lived here. I ended up in the study. The curtains were half drawn, letting a soft beam of light filter through the window and land across the old mahogany desk. Dust particles floated like snow in the sunlight. I sat down in the cracked leather chair, his chair, and closed my eyes. How many times had we sat here, me asking questions, him pretending to be annoyed, then launching into a 20-minute monologue about furniture joints or finish techniques or his favorite trick to remove old varnish without damaging the grain. The desk creaked slightly under my elbow. I glanced down. That sound, it wasn't familiar, not from that part of the desk. I ran my hand along the bottom edge of the right drawer. Tapped, then felt a slight give in the wood near the back panel. A hidden latch. My heart ticked faster. I pressed. There was a soft click, and a narrow drawer slid open, almost soundless. Inside was a small flash drive, silver, unmarked. And beneath it, a single envelope, yellowed at the edges, with my name written in my uncle's blocky handwriting. Andy. My fingers trembled as I picked it up. No wax seal, just a simple flap, sealed with tape. I opened it and found a note. It wasn't long, just a few lines, written in ink that had slightly smudged. "If you're reading this, it means I couldn't go through with it. I'm sorry. You deserved better. But they put me in a corner. I thought I could fix it later. I was wrong." Ray, my throat tightened. I turned back to the flash drive, now suddenly heavy in my hand. I didn't want to watch it. Not here. Not like this. I drove straight home. Didn't even take off my coat. Plugged the drive into my laptop and opened the only file on it. A video labeled simply, "For Andy." It began with a bit of static. Then there he was. Uncle Ray sat in his armchair, wearing his flannel shirt, glasses low on his nose. He looked older than I remembered, more tired. There was a tremble in his hands as he adjusted the camera. He let out a sigh. "Andy," he began, voice rough but clear, "if you're watching this, then I didn't do what I should have done." He looked down, then back up. "I wanted everything to go to you. That was always the plan. You earned it. You worked for it. You gave more to this business than I ever could have asked." He ran a hand over his face. "But your aunt, she found something. Old photos. Things from before I settled down. Things I thought were buried. She said if I didn't change the will, she'd go public, make noise, call me unstable, said it would ruin me, ruin the business." He shook his head. "I was scared, kid. Not of her. Of the fallout. Of being remembered for something ugly instead of for what we built." A pause. I told myself I'd fix it, that I'd rewrite it later, quietly, that I had time, but I guess I didn't. He leaned closer to the camera then, eyes sharp, almost pleading. "You have to know I never meant to hurt you. You were like a son to me. The son I never had. And if anyone's telling you different now, they're lying." He sighed again, softer this time. There was something broken in it. "I don't know if you'll forgive me. I'm not sure you should, but I want you to fight for it, if you can. Don't let them take everything. Not this time." He hesitated. Then, quieter. "You matter. And what we built, it matters." The screen went black. I sat frozen for a long time, listening to the silence, hearing his voice echo in my chest. My hands were shaking, but not from grief this time. Something else had started to wake up in me. Something I thought Graham and that damn will had buried. Hope and fury. He did leave it to me. They took it, and I was going to take it back. I watched the video again. And again. By the 5th time, I wasn't even watching anymore, just staring at the screen, hearing my uncle's voice echo over the soft hum of my old fridge. You matter. And what we built, it matters. The words hit differently each time. First like a knife, then like a weight, and finally like a match pressed against kindling. But still, I couldn't move. My apartment was quiet except for the ticking of the wall clock and the faint sound of cars outside. A single lamp lit the room, casting long shadows on the floor. Boxes of my tools, the ones Graham hadn't claimed, sat unopened by the wall. My coat hung off the back of the chair like it had given up too. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees, rubbing my temples with both hands. What was I supposed to do? Go to court? Sue my own family? Dig up the past just to prove I wasn't crazy? Or worse, greedy? I could already hear the whispers. Andy's just bitter. He's trying to grab what isn't his. He's jealous. Graham got everything. It didn't matter that I had the video, the flash drive, a note in my name. People believe what they want to believe, especially when it's easier than admitting the truth. And part of me wondered if letting it go would just be simpler, cleaner. That scared me. Because if I let this go, what else would I let them take? The knock on the door came soft and familiar. Andy. Jenna's voice was muffled through the wood. You still awake? I stood, moved to the door, opened it. She held up 2 cups of coffee like a peace offering. Didn't know what you needed, so I brought caffeine. I stepped aside and let her in. She sat on the couch without waiting, curled one leg under her, and handed me a cup. She looked tired, the kind of tired that came from caring too much for too long. Her hair was up in a messy knot, and her glasses were slightly crooked. I'd never been more grateful to see someone. You watched it? She asked softly. I nodded. Too many times. She sipped her coffee, then looked at me. And? I don't know, I said. Part of me wants to burn the whole house down, figuratively. The other part just wants to disappear and forget any of this happened. Jenna didn't respond right away. She set her cup on the table, leaned forward, resting her forearms on her knees. If you had a choice, she said, between laying low or fighting for what's yours, and you knew you'd win, what would you do? I blinked. What? Let's say it was guaranteed. You'd get it all back, the truth, the shop, the legacy. No mess, no doubt, no public drama. What would you choose? Fight for it, I said without hesitation. She nodded. So the real question isn't what you want. It's whether you're willing to take the risk. I looked away. People will say I'm doing it for the money, that I'm just bitter. Let them, she said. You know the truth. I know the truth. And your uncle left proof of it. That flash drive isn't just digital junk. It's his voice, his words. It's a confession and a call to action in one. I let the silence hang for a moment. I'm not the kind of guy who sues people, Jenna. No. You're the kind of guy who fixes broken things, she said gently. Well, this is broken, and you're the only one who can fix it. I stared down at the flash drive on the coffee table. It looked so small now, insignificant, and yet, it felt heavier than anything I'd ever held. I thought about all the years I spent sanding, staining, repairing, the nights I stayed late in the shop, the weekends I gave up, the life I built around a promise. Uncle Ray didn't just owe me an inheritance. He owed me the truth. And maybe I owed that to myself too. I don't have a lawyer, I said finally. I know one, Jenna replied. Friend of a friend. She's tough, quiet, smart. You won't find better. I looked at her. This could get ugly. She smiled. Good. It's time someone saw what ugly looks like on them for a change. I picked up the flash drive and turned it over in my fingers. Then I stood. Call her, I said. Let's do this. The conference room smelled like stale coffee and varnished wood. Long table, neutral carpeting, a wall clock that ticked louder than it should. It wasn't a courtroom, but it might as well have been. The stakes felt just as high. I sat on one side of the table with my lawyer, Mira Lawson, sharp-eyed, early 30s, in a black suit so cleanly pressed it looked like it had been sculpted. She barely spoke during small talk. Didn't smile much either. But she listened. Really listened. Across from us sat Graham, looking paler than usual, his signature confidence a little faded around the edges. Next to him was a man in a gray suit with slicked back hair. His lawyer, Mr. Penner. Cool, condescending, and probably paid by the hour to raise his eyebrows and speak in objections. At the head of the table sat Mr. Haddock, a probate mediator, older, calm, eyes like granite. He greeted us all politely, then folded his hands over a slim folder and said, "Let's begin." Mira opened her laptop, connected a flash drive, and slid a printed packet across the table. "We're submitting into consideration a file found in Mr. Whitmore's private desk. The flash drive contains a video dated 3 weeks before the official will was signed, as well as a signed PDF document that constitutes a prior version of his will, which names Andrew Whitmore as the sole inheritor of all property and business holdings." Mr. Penner didn't even glance at the paper. Anyone could create a fake will and backdate it. "You're aware of how easy it is to manipulate file metadata?" Mira smiled, the barest curve of her lips. "Of course, which is why we've brought a certified digital forensics expert's report verifying the creation date, modification date, and document integrity. You'll find it attached to the back of the packet." Haddock flipped through the documents silently. Graham shifted in his chair. I watched him closely. He still wore a blazer, but it looked tighter today. His hands were folded too tightly in his lap. Mr. Penner kept his voice smooth. "Even if the file is legitimate, there's no evidence that Mr. Whitmore was of sound mind when it was created. My client's mother will testify that he showed signs of cognitive decline in his final year." Carol sat at the far end of the room. She wore a cream suit and a heavy brooch shaped like a rose. Her expression was brittle. Mira didn't even blink. "We've included medical records from his primary physician, dated within a month of the original will. They show no signs of cognitive impairment. Additionally, 4 former employees of Mr. Whitmore's workshop have signed affidavits stating he was mentally sharp and fully engaged in business decisions during that time." She tapped a few keys and opened the video file. "And then," she said, turning the screen toward the room, "there's this." Uncle Ray appeared on the screen, just as he had in my apartment, tired, steady, regretful. He spoke clearly, directly. "I wanted everything to go to you. That was always the plan. You earned it. You gave more to this business than I ever could have asked." The silence in the room grew heavy as he continued. He mentioned the blackmail, the threats, the pressure, his fear of a public scandal. I told myself I'd fix it, that I had time. But I guess I didn't. When the video ended, Mira let the screen go black and folded her hands neatly on the table. "Mr. Whitmore's words speak for themselves," she said. "He was pressured into signing a second will. The first one was made freely, with clear intent and full capacity. That is the document we believe represents his true wishes." Mr. Penner shifted in his seat, but Graham beat him to it. "This is ridiculous," Graham snapped, color rising in his face. "That video could have been filmed any time. My mom was with him constantly. If he was that terrified, don't you think she'd have noticed?" Carol finally spoke, her voice tight. "Raymond was an emotional man. He overreacted sometimes. You can't take everything he said at face value." Mira leaned forward just slightly. "Then why did he hide the will?" No one answered. I didn't say much. I didn't need to. For the first time in weeks I felt solid, like I was standing on something real again. Mr. Haddock closed the folder and looked at all of us in turn. "Based on the presented documentation, the forensic reports, and the testimony in the video, I am inclined to consider the earlier will as valid. Pending final certification, Mr. Andrew Whitmore will be recognized as the legal heir to the Whitmore estate and business." Graham's face dropped. Carol stood up so abruptly, her chair squeaked against the floor. "This is a disgrace," she hissed. "You're letting a workshop boy steal what should have gone to my son. This wasn't yours to begin with," I said quietly, standing too. She looked like she might say more, but Mira cut in smoothly. "We'll be in touch regarding the transition paperwork." We walked out without looking back. Out in the hallway, I finally exhaled. "You okay?" Mira asked, slipping her laptop into her bag. I nodded slowly. For the first time in a long while, yeah. She smiled. "Good, because now the hard part begins, rebuilding." I glanced at the flash drive in my pocket. I already started. Sunlight streamed through the tall front windows, casting golden stripes across the newly sanded floor. The smell of varnish still lingered faintly in the air. mixing with the scent of strong black coffee and lemon oil. It wasn't perfect yet. There were still boxes to unpack, walls to paint, but the heart of the workshop was beating again. And this time, it was mine. I stood at the long oak work table, the one Uncle Ray and I had built together a decade ago, running my hand over the fresh lacquer. I'd spent 3 straight nights restoring it. Every scratch, every dent, every groove had a memory in it. And now it had a future again, too. Behind me, Marcus and Luis were setting up clamps along the back wall, their laughter echoing through the open space. They'd both agreed to come back without hesitation, said it felt like coming home. Near the front counter, Jenna crouched with a pencil behind her ear, sketching ideas for the new signage on a torn piece of craft paper. She'd insisted we update the name but keep the original font. Whitmore and Company, Restoration Studio, her idea. My hands, our shop. It still didn't feel quite real. I was wiping down a set of antique cabinet doors when I heard the bell over the door, the new one I'd just installed, chime softly. I turned and saw him. Graham stood in the doorway, looking more rumpled than usual. No blazer today, just jeans, a fitted tee, and sunglasses he didn't bother to take off. His hands were stuffed in his pockets. He hesitated before stepping inside. "You've been busy," he said, scanning the space. I didn't respond. I kept wiping the cabinet door until the cloth was folded neatly on the bench. "You, got the floors redone?" "I brought them back," I said. "Underneath your laminate." He let out a weak chuckle. Guess we had different visions. I didn't offer him a seat. Graham wandered a few steps deeper inside, tapping his knuckles lightly on the table. "Place looks good. Real good." I crossed my arms. "Why are you here, Graham?" He sighed. "Look, I know things got messy, and I know you probably still hate me." "I don't," I interrupted. He blinked. "Oh, but I'm not forgetting what you did either." He shifted uncomfortably. "I just thought, I don't know. We grew up together, man. I thought maybe we could let things go. Start over? You want a second chance," I said. "For what?" He looked away. "To not be the villain in your story." I took a step forward. "Here's the thing, Graham. You weren't the villain because of what you inherited. You were the villain because you knew it wasn't right, and you took it anyway. You watched me unravel, and you kept smiling." He flinched, just barely. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "I'm not vengeful," I said. "But I'm done pretending that being quiet makes me a good person. I used to think walking away from conflict meant strength. Now I know it just meant I was letting myself disappear." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "So you're not going to forgive me?" "I forgave you the moment I stopped needing anything from you," I said simply. "But I'm not going to forget what it taught me." He nodded, lips pressed tight. "Right. Well, I guess that's that." As he turned toward the door, I added, "You were right about one thing, though." He looked over his shoulder. "This place does have new life now, just not the kind you were thinking of." The bell chimed again as he left. I exhaled slowly. My hands were steady. Jenna emerged from behind a display cabinet with a raised eyebrow. "Was that what I think it was?" "A very late apology," I said, picking up the cabinet door again. She smirked. "You handled it better than I would have." "I'm learning," I said. A beat passed. Then she added, "You know, you're not the same guy who walked out of this shop 3 months ago." "I know," I said. "I think I finally like the guy I walked back in as." At noon, Marcus made tea, the way Uncle Ray used to. In the ancient steel kettle, he insisted still worked better than anything modern. We gathered around the bench, mismatched mugs in hand, tools scattered across the surface, the sun warming the space like a quiet blessing. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like peace, and maybe that was even better. As I sipped, I caught Jenna's eye and smiled. She smiled back. I glanced toward the office, my office now, where the flash drive sat in a drawer. I hadn't touched it since the hearing, but sometimes, in quiet moments like this, I could still hear his voice. "I always knew you'd figure it out, even if I wasn't around to see it." I closed my eyes, let the warmth settle in my chest. The kettle whistled behind us, and I knew this time I wasn't the villain in the story. I was finally the one writing it.